At 38,000 feet, there is no shoulder to pull over on, no emergency lane, no second chance. When something goes wrong over the Pacific Ocean, the nearest airport can be hundreds of miles away, and every decision inside the cockpit carries the weight of hundreds of lives. On an otherwise ordinary afternoon, Flight 914 departed Tokyo for San Francisco aboard a Boeing 777, carrying 327 passengers and 16 crew members. The weather forecast was almost perfect. Winds were light. Visibility stretched for miles. Every system check before departure showed the aircraft was ready for another routine crossing. Nothing suggested this flight would soon become the focus of investigators, engineers, and aviation experts around the world. For the first 3 hours, everything was exactly as planned. Passengers settled into the rhythm of a long-haul journey. Some watched movies, others slept beneath blankets while the soft sound of the engines blended into the background. In the cockpit, Captain Adrian Brooks monitored the aircraft alongside First Officer Sophia Malik. Both pilots had thousands of hours flying wide-body jets. The autopilot was engaged, fuel burn matched the flight plan, and the aircraft tracked perfectly across the Pacific. Then, without warning, the calm disappeared. A violent bang echoed through the cabin. The aircraft shuddered so hard that drinks spilled from tray tables and overhead bins rattled. Passengers looked around in confusion. Then came a second vibration, stronger than the first. People seated beside the left wing pressed their faces against the windows. What they saw made several of them freeze. The left engine was coming apart. Panels from the engine cowling separated into the sky. Pieces of metal disappeared behind the wing. The front of the engine looked exposed, with damaged fan blades still turning. Several passengers instinctively reached for their phones. Within seconds, videos of the damaged engine were being recorded from multiple seats. Inside the cockpit, warning tones filled the flight deck. The aircraft's display illuminated with multiple alerts: left engine fail, low oil pressure. Engine vibration. Captain Brooks immediately disconnected the autopilot. His heartbeat accelerated. His voice did not confirm left engine. Confirmed, throttle idle. Idle, fuel cut off, fuel cut off. The damaged engine slowly wound down as the aircraft continued on its remaining engine. The vibration eased, but it did not disappear completely. Captain Brooks declared an emergency. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Flight 914. Left engine failure. Request immediate diversion. Oceanic controllers acknowledged the call immediately. They began calculating every available airport within range. The results were far from ideal. The closest suitable runway was more than 90 minutes away. Returning to Japan would take even longer. Below them stretched thousands of square miles of open ocean. Back in the passenger cabin, fear spread quickly. People who had not seen the engine noticed the expressions of those sitting beside the windows. Questions filled the cabin. What happened? Did the engine explode? Are we going down? The cabin crew remained calm. They secured loose equipment and reassured passengers while quietly preparing for the possibility of an emergency landing. The Boeing 777 was designed to fly safely with one engine, but the crew still needed to understand exactly what had failed. Back in the cockpit, First Officer Malik reviewed the system pages. The fire indication is gone. Good. But we've got another problem. A new caution appeared: hydraulic pressure low. Captain Brooks stared at the display. If the engine failure had damaged hydraulic lines inside the wing, the aircraft could gradually lose important flight controls. He gently moved the control column. The aircraft still responded normally, for now. Meanwhile, at the airline's operations center, engineers watched live aircraft data arriving through satellite communications: engine performance, fuel flow, oil pressure, hydraulic status. Everything was updating in real time. One engineer opened the maintenance history for the left engine. There was something unusual. 2 weeks earlier, technicians had recorded a slight increase in vibration during descent. The inspection found no visible damage. The engine passed every required check. The report was signed. The aircraft returned to service. Now that same engine was badly damaged over the Pacific. The engineer leaned closer to the screen. He opened another report, then another. Each one showed small vibration increases. Each one remained below inspection limits. Individually, they meant very little. Together, they formed a pattern nobody had recognized before Flight 914 left the ground. Back on board, passengers continued recording the damaged engine. One short video was uploaded using the aircraft's satellite Wi-Fi. Within minutes, it began spreading across social media. Millions of people had no idea whether the aircraft would reach land safely. TV newsrooms started monitoring the story. Aviation forums exploded with speculation. Some blamed maintenance, others suspected a manufacturing defect. Inside the cockpit, none of that mattered. Captain Brooks focused on only one objective: bring the airplane home. Then another warning appeared: fuel imbalance. First Officer Malik checked the fuel quantities. Her expression changed immediately. "Captain, the left tank is dropping." Brooks looked at the display. They weren't simply flying on one engine anymore. They were losing fuel, and the nearest runway was still more than an hour away. First Officer Sophia Malik stared at the fuel display. "Captain, the left tank is losing fuel." Captain Adrian Brooks looked at the numbers. The drop was slow, but it was continuing. The damaged engine had apparently caused more than an engine failure. Fragments from the explosion may have damaged a fuel line inside the wing. Brooks immediately ordered the cross-feed system opened. Fuel from the opposite tank began supplying the remaining engine. For several seconds, the numbers stabilized. Then the fuel loss began again. Not faster, but not stopping either. The cockpit became quiet. They still had enough fuel to reach the nearest suitable airport, but their margin was getting smaller. And the Pacific Ocean was still below them. Captain Brooks contacted air traffic control again. "Flight 914. We have a possible fuel leak following engine failure. Request priority handling and updated diversion information." The controller responded immediately. "Flight 914, you are cleared direct to the nearest suitable airport. Emergency services are being notified." On the ground, the situation escalated. Airport rescue vehicles were positioned near the runway. Fire crews prepared for a possible fuel-related emergency. Medical teams were placed on standby. The airport was cleared of all unnecessary traffic. Everyone was preparing for an aircraft that might arrive with one engine, reduced hydraulic pressure, and an unknown amount of fuel remaining. Inside the passenger cabin, the mood had changed completely. The aircraft was descending now. Passengers could feel the change in engine power. Some had already seen the damaged engine, others were watching the faces of the cabin crew. A flight attendant moved through the aisle and stopped beside a nervous passenger. "Are we going to land safely?" The flight attendant smiled. "That is the plan." It was a simple answer, but behind that calm expression, the crew understood the seriousness of the situation. Back in the cockpit, the pilots continued working through their checklists. The remaining engine was operating normally, hydraulic pressure was low but stable, fuel was still decreasing, the aircraft remained controllable. For the moment, the situation was manageable, but aviation emergencies can change in seconds. At 20,000 feet, another caution appeared. The left-wing flight control system showed abnormal pressure. Captain Brooks studied the display. "Let's keep the configuration changes to a minimum." The aircraft would need to land with as little additional stress on the damaged systems as possible. The runway ahead was long enough. The weather was favorable. The wind was calm. The most important factors were finally working in their favor. Then, through the clouds ahead, the island appeared for the first time since the engine failure. The crew could see land. The runway was still more than 40 miles away, but the sight of solid ground changed everything. Captain Brooks contacted the tower. "Flight 914, emergency aircraft, one engine inoperative, possible fuel leak, requesting immediate landing clearance." The tower replied almost instantly. "Flight 914, runway is clear. Emergency services are standing by. You are cleared to land." First Officer Malik began the landing checklist. Landing gear. The gear extended. The pilots waited for the confirmation lights. 3 green indicators appeared. Gear down and locked. Flaps. The aircraft began configuring for landing. Captain Brooks carefully monitored every movement. The damaged wing was still carrying fuel. The hydraulic system was still under pressure. The remaining engine was working harder than normal, and there was no room for another major failure. At 1,000 feet, the approach was stable. At 500 feet, the runway was directly ahead. The aircraft was slightly misaligned because of the asymmetric thrust from the single operating engine. Brooks corrected gently. No sudden movements, no unnecessary control inputs. At 100 feet, the runway filled the windshield. The aircraft descended through the final few seconds. Then the main landing gear touched the runway. The touchdown was firm, but controlled. The remaining engine produced reverse thrust. Brakes activated. Emergency vehicles raced alongside the aircraft. For a few moments, nobody inside the cabin spoke. Then the aircraft slowed to a stop. The passengers erupted in applause. Some cried. Some hugged strangers. Others simply sat silently, trying to understand what had just happened. Every person on board had survived. But the real story was only beginning. Within hours, images of the damaged engine had spread around the world. News reports showed the same shocking footage again and again. A Boeing 777 flying over the Pacific with one engine badly damaged. Aviation experts examined the video frame by frame. Investigators immediately secured the aircraft. The damaged engine was removed and transported to a specialized examination facility. What they found would change the entire investigation. The failure had begun inside the engine's fan assembly. A microscopic crack had formed in one of the fan blades. The crack had grown slowly over time. Eventually, the blade fractured at high speed. The imbalance created enormous forces inside the engine. Other components began failing almost instantly. The engine casing was damaged. Fragments escaped. And some of those fragments struck systems inside the wing. The hydraulic damage, the fuel leak, the warning messages. They were all connected to the same chain of events, but investigators still had one major question. Why had the crack not been detected earlier? They returned to the maintenance records. The previous vibration reports were reviewed. The engine had shown a gradual change in vibration behavior. None of the individual reports had exceeded the official limits, but investigators discovered that the trend had never been analyzed as a single pattern. Each inspection had been treated as an isolated event. One vibration report. Then another, each time the engine was cleared for service. The final investigation concluded that the failure was caused by progressive fatigue damage that had developed over time. The aircraft had not simply suffered a random failure. It had experienced a problem that gradually became more serious, and the warning signs had been there. The airline introduced new inspection procedures. Engine vibration data would be analyzed over longer periods. Technicians would receive additional training. Manufacturers would update inspection recommendations for similar components. The lessons learned from Flight 914 reached operators around the world. The pilots were formally praised for their decision-making during the emergency, but Captain Brooks refused to describe himself as a hero. "I followed the training," he said. "That is what we are there to do." For the passengers, the experience was different. Some returned to flying within days. Others needed months before boarding another aircraft. Several passengers who had recorded the damaged engine continued receiving messages from people around the world. Their videos became a permanent record of the moment when a routine flight suddenly became an emergency. But the most important lesson from Flight 914 was not that an aircraft could lose an engine and still land safely. Modern twin-engine airliners are designed for that possibility. The deeper lesson was about the warnings that come before a failure. A small vibration, a minor trend. A report that appears acceptable, a decision to continue operating. Individually, each one may seem harmless, but when small warnings begin pointing in the same direction, ignoring the pattern can become dangerous. Flight 914 crossed the Pacific with more than 300 people on board. For a few terrifying minutes, the aircraft was damaged, losing fuel and hundreds of miles from land. But the airplane remained controllable. The crew remained focused, and the systems designed to protect the passengers continued doing their job. That is why the aircraft reached the runway. That is why every passenger walked away. And that is why every passenger walked away. And that is why, years later, aviation investigators still study incidents like this. Because the most important question is not always what failed. Sometimes the more important question is this: how long had the warning been there before anyone realized what it meant? At 38,000 feet, the Pacific Ocean leaves very little room for mistakes. But it also reveals something remarkable about modern aviation. An aircraft can suffer a catastrophic mechanical failure thousands of miles from land. And with the right design, the right training, and the right decisions, it can still bring everyone safely home.